There is a moment that changes everything. Not the moment they apologize. Not the moment they admit what they did. Not the moment they finally understand your pain. That moment almost never comes. The real turning point arrives much more quietly. It arrives the day you stop needing it. Because as long as you are waiting for someone to understand what they did to you, a part of your life remains tied to them. You replay conversations. You imagine different outcomes. You search for better words. You explain yourself again and again, hoping that this time something will finally click. Maybe they will see your perspective. Maybe they will recognize the damage. Maybe they will become the person you always hoped they could be. But what if the thing keeping you trapped is not their behavior? What if it is your hope that they will someday become different? This is one of the hardest truths in human psychology. Some people understand exactly what they are doing. They simply have no reason to change. And the longer you wait for understanding from someone who benefits from your confusion, the longer they remain connected to your emotional world. The day you stop chasing their understanding is the day something remarkable begins to happen. The energy starts returning to you. The attention starts returning to you. The life that was revolving around them slowly begins revolving around yourself again. And that is where their control starts to weaken. Not because they changed, because you did. Most people think control is maintained through force, but psychological control is usually maintained through attention. Who occupies your thoughts? Who determines your emotional state? Who influences your decisions? Who controls your peace? The answer to those questions reveals where power actually lives. Many people believe they have escaped unhealthy relationships while still carrying them inside their minds every day. The person may be gone. The control remains. And that is why freedom begins internally before it becomes visible externally. The first step is letting go of the need for closure from the person who created the wound. Because sometimes closure is not given. Sometimes closure is chosen. Number 1. You no longer need them to understand. Once that shift begins, another important realization follows. You stop reacting. Most people believe arguments are about winning. They are not. In many unhealthy dynamics, arguments are about engagement. Every emotional reaction creates another opportunity for the cycle to continue. Every explanation becomes another opening. Every defense becomes another invitation. That is why one of the most powerful responses often looks like nothing at all. You become less interesting to fight with, less interesting to provoke, less interesting to manipulate. Imagine a person throwing hooks into the water. They keep casting because fish keep biting. But what happens when nothing bites anymore? Eventually they move somewhere else. Many people spend years trying to find the perfect response. The perfect comeback, the perfect explanation, the perfect defense. Yet the most powerful response is often the absence of emotional fuel. Not coldness, not cruelty, not passive aggression, simply emotional neutrality. The ability to remain calm in situations that once consumed you, because manipulation feeds on reaction. Without reaction, much of its power disappears. Number 2. You stop reacting. But emotional neutrality becomes much easier when another skill develops. The skill of slowing things down. Manipulation often depends on speed. Fast accusation, fast emotional pressure, fast assumptions, fast conclusion. The goal is simple. If you react before you think, someone else gets to guide the conversation. That is why one of the most underrated psychological tools is curiosity. Not confrontation. Curiosity. Instead of immediately defending yourself, you ask questions. Can you explain that? What do you mean by that? Help me understand your reasoning. Something fascinating happens when confusion is forced into clarity. Weak arguments begin collapsing under their own weight. Contradictions become visible. Stories that sounded convincing suddenly start sounding incomplete. The purpose is not to expose someone. The purpose is to understand reality more clearly. Because clarity is always more powerful than emotional intensity. People who see clearly rarely need to fight as much. People who see clearly make better decisions. And better decisions gradually create better lives. Number 3. You start asking questions. Yet clarity requires something else. It requires trusting your own experience. Many people lose themselves, not because someone controlled them. They lose themselves because they slowly stop trusting what they knew to be true. A conversation happens. You remember it clearly. Later, someone insists it never happened. You question yourself. Another event happens. Again, your memory is challenged. Again, you begin doubting yourself. Eventually, a dangerous pattern develops. You stop asking whether something is true. You start asking whether you are allowed to believe it. And that is where confusion becomes powerful. The solution is surprisingly simple. Document your reality. Write things down. Keep notes. Keep journals. Record important observation. Not because you are preparing for battle, because you are protecting your relationship with yourself. A person who trusts their own observations becomes much harder to manipulate. A person who remembers their own truth becomes much harder to control. 4. You trust your own reality again. And once you begin trusting yourself again, another transformation naturally follows. Your world expands. One of the most overlooked signs of psychological control is isolation. Not always dramatic isolation, not always obvious isolation. Sometimes it happens one small step at a time. You stop calling certain friends. You stop attending certain gatherings. You stop pursuing certain interests. Your life becomes smaller without you noticing. And when your life becomes smaller, one person starts occupying more and more space inside it. That is why growth itself becomes an act of freedom. Not rebellion, not revenge. Growth. You reconnect with people. You develop new interests. You create goals that belong to you. You build routines that support your future. You create experiences that have nothing to do with the person who once occupied your thoughts. At first, these changes seem small. A conversation, a hobby, a class, a new project. But each one quietly expands the boundaries of your life. And something interesting happens when your life becomes larger. The people who once felt enormous begin looking smaller, not because they shrank, because your perspective expanded. Number 5. Your life no longer revolves around them. Many people spend years trying to escape a cage without realizing there is another option. Become bigger than the cage. Grow until the walls no longer reach you. Grow until your future becomes more interesting than your past. Grow until your attention naturally moves toward possibility instead of pain. That is where real freedom lives. Not in winning. Not in proving a point. Not in getting justice from someone who may never offer it. Freedom lives in reclaiming your attention. Because attention is life. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. Where your energy goes, your future follows. The day they truly lose control. And that brings us back to where we started. The day they begin losing control over you is not the day they finally understand. It is not the day they apologize. It is not the day they admit the truth. It is the day you stop waiting. The day you stop standing outside a locked door, hoping someone on the other side will eventually let you in. The day you realize there are thousands of other doors. Doors leading toward peace, growth, friendship, purpose, meaning, and most importantly, yourself. That is the quiet shift people rarely talk about. Control ends long before the other person notices. It ends the moment you stop feeding it. The moment you stop chasing what was never yours to receive. The moment you choose your own life over their approval. And when that day comes, something extraordinary happens. The same words lose their power. The same tactics lose their effect. The same person who once occupied your mind no longer controls your emotions. Not because they became weaker, because you became stronger. Quietly, gradually, one decision at a time. And that is the day they truly lose control.